What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly sports history for July 7th, 2023. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Still clearing up from this cold and whatever I have going on, so I do apologize for the voice and the sniffles and a possible cough or two. But huge win for the Phillies last night. They completed the three-game sweep of the Tampa Bay Rays in Tampa. 3-1 in extra innings. Schwarber knocked in the go-ahead run in the 11th. Christopher Sanchez, I think at this point, has solidified himself as the fifth starter, which is huge because now you don't necessarily need to look for another starting pitcher at the trade deadline. They can focus on really hoping and making the shift to Bryce Harper to first, moving Schwarber to DH, and really look for an outfielder who can hit. So that it's the best case scenario, and they were talking about it last night during the post game show for a little bit. Sanchez he pitched well, but he pitched well against like the Nationals and the Mets. He did it against one of the best offense, if not the best offense in the American League. So this is big news for the Phillies. I mean, obviously winning the three in a row against them, setting up this huge series this weekend against the Marlins is big. But to me, you just solidified who your fifth starter is. And that's big considering this team does have other needs to fill. It was their 12th straight road win, one short of the club record, which was 13, set in 1976. They will have a chance to tie that tonight and possibly even break it tomorrow. This series is huge. The Phillies are currently 2.5 back of the Marlins for the top wild card spot. And as I mentioned, we did it with when we talked about it earlier. We picked off the Mets now. So now we got our sights on the Marlins. Let's knock them off. And if we can somehow pull off a sweep and overtake them heading into the All-Star break, that's huge because the Braves eventually are going to cool off. But now it's just a matter of it's going to be a great series. So looking forward to it. Wheeler versus Alcantara tonight. Must-watch TV in the Philadelphia area. All right, time for As the Harden Turns. And as far as Harden goes, there's not really much more to it. I know there were reports that the guy from ESPN, Brian Windhorst, is like, oh, well, I don't know what he's up to, but just because he's silent doesn't mean that Morey is not up to something. He had made the comment that, on July 6th or July 5th, whatever date the interview was, Tyrese Maxey is not available. Doesn't mean if all of a sudden something else can come up, he isn't available. He's got something up his sleeve, blah, 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 blah. So again, I don't know if he doesn't know anything, or he knows something and can't say, or just speculation to get views. I don't know. But I think the big news yesterday was the fact that Damian Lillard, it came out and basically said Miami or bust, which it's kind of odd to me that you would hurt your trade value that way. And he doesn't seem like that kind of guy. So that kind of got glossed over, and Miami doesn't necessarily have the parts to trade for him. So we'll see how that develops. I guess the Harden part of it is the Sixers seem willing to just sit on him, and they're not going to trade him for just a bunch of scrap heap guys. They really want to make the team better because they obviously are better with him on the team than with a bunch of random throwing guys. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know. It's interesting, but at the same time, it's exhausting. I just wish we could hit fast forward and play it out. But the Sixers did make a move. Montrezl Harrell is coming back on a 1-year deal. They signed Mo Bamba the other day, so I don't know what that means for B-Ball Paul, who I really like. I didn't get a chance to really read. I just found out this morning that Harold re-signed. So I'll get more information on that for you guys tomorrow. But they have some depth now behind Joe. So it's just a matter of figuring out the Harden situation and moving forward from there. All right, before we get into today's episode, if you're looking for some t-shirts or some gear to wear down to the shore this summer, something to do while you're going to a barbecue, lounging by the pool, check out phillygoat.com. They have a great selection for all your Philly sports teams. They have Philly neighborhoods. We talked about the Philly Pride. They have Rocky, just Philly-centric gear everywhere. If you're one of those people that does early Christmas shopping, they have some nice sweatshirts and long-sleeve T-shirts that you can get and start stocking away now. Whatever your deal is, go to phillygoat.com. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off of your order. Make sure it has the authentic goat on the sleeve. These shirts are comfortable. Get them any size, any color you want, kid sizes, and they're comfortable on top of that. So go to phillygoat.com. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery. All right, it's going to be all Phillies now the rest of the day, but on this day, we're going to go back to 1964. On July 7th, 1964 was the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. The National League won it 7-4 after a 3-run walk-off home run by Johnny Callison of the Phillies. He hit that off of Dick Raditz. That led him to win the MVP over guys like Roberto Clemente, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Willie Stargell, Orlando Cepeda. And this is back at a time when the All-Star Game meant a lot. There was no interleague play. So to see the guys from the National League and the American League play against each other was great. For a Philly to not only be the hero, but win the MVP. It's the only time Philly has won the All-Star Game MVP, which is great. And at that point in the 1964 season, it was all Phillies. I mean, you had Jim Bunning pitching a perfect game on Father's Day. You had now Callison winning the MVP of the All-Star Game. They were in first place. And it was looking all roses and unicorns and butterflies for the Phillies. But we know how that season turned out. More on that in a few minutes. All right, time for our Philly Sports Most Lovable Loser tournament coverage. Yesterday, we had a Flyers regional first-round matchup, the 4 versus 5 seed, where the number 4 seed, the 84-85 Flyers, took on the 5 seed, the 86-87 Flyers. And with 66% of the vote, the 86-87 Flyers that made it to the Stanley Cup Finals and forced a Game 7 against the Oilers, with Vezina Trophy winner Ron Hextall in gold, pull off the upset. So that means we will have 2 lower seeds, the 5 seed as well as the 8 seed, taking on each other in a few weeks or a few days, I should say, for their second round matchup. So the 86-87 Flyers pulled off the upset with 66% of the vote. All right, today we move on to the Phillies regional. And to me, this matchup is very intriguing and to me the epitome of what this tournament is all about. Today we have the number 1 seed 2009 Phillies taking on the number 8 seed 1964 Phillies. That 64 team is the only team in the tournament that did not actually make the postseason. But when I was coming up with this tournament, it's kind of like, were these teams beloved? The 09 Phillies, absolutely. The 64 Phillies, absolutely. I was just talking to a guy at a graduation party a few weeks ago who had vivid memories of that 64 team, Callison's home run, Bunning's perfect game, and just the emotion and the passion, and you could just tell that he was still hurt in 2023 by that collapse of that 64 team. So you check off the beloved. Did they have the talent? Absolutely. I mean, I think of all of those teams, top to bottom, that 2009 team may have been the best team of all of them. That includes the 10 and 11 teams with all that pitching they had. The 64 team was very young and talented. You had all-stars, future Hall of Famers, top to bottom. So check that off. And the disappointment, absolutely. Anytime you get to the World Series and you have a shot to win it, of course you're going to be disappointed. So there's the 09 team, and the epitome of disappointment is that 64 Phillies team. So to me, this matchup is what this tournament is all about. So let's start with the 1 seed 2009 Phillies. They were the defending champs. Everybody was riding high. They finished with a record of 93-69, their third straight NL East title. They did go to the World Series, as I mentioned. They won the division by 6 games, so they kind of ran away with it that year. Raul Ibanez was one of the key additions to that team. Ruben Amaro took over as the new GM, which ultimately he was given the task of keeping that team on top, which he did for a few years. They acquired Cliff Lee in a trade that summer. They signed Pedro Martinez, who played a key role in getting into the postseason and early in that postseason run. Just a few other highlights from that year. I guess you could call this a highlight. Unfortunately, that was when Harry Callison passed away. You had Ryan Howard, Raul, Chase Utley, Victorino, and Jason Worth were the All-Stars. And they were just a great team. They rolled through the playoffs. They beat the Brewers 3-1, or the Rockies 3-1 in the divisional playoff that year. They beat the Dodgers 4-1 in the NLCS. They had that great Jimmy Rollins. I was at that game, the Jimmy Rollins walk-off double to win Game 4, I believe it was. And then they ultimately lost to the Yankees 4-2 after winning Game 1. They should have won Game 2, but because they put the stupid camera out off into the left or the right field stands, and I mean, I don't know, the replays were blurry, but I mean, it looked like that camera was in play and the ball hit the camera. But yeah, you want to talk about disappointment and just still being upset about it years later? There you go. But I was at the Cliff Lee game, the only game they won in that World Series at home. So just overall a great team. The 64 team, obviously, that was the fold of 64. It was just all Phillies up until that point. Bunning had a perfect game. We talked about Callison winning the MVP. They had a 5.5 game lead to start September, to the point where TV Guide on their World Series preview edition, and for those younger people that don't know what TV Guide is, if you hit the guide button on your remote where it gives you what's on at what time and gives you the description, didn't have that back in the day. That used to be a little magazine you would get. It was like maybe this big, probably like this thick if you're watching on YouTube, and it had articles, but basically told you everything that was going to be on for that week or month. I forget. I think it was a weekly thing. But their World Series preview had a picture of Connie Mack Stadium because it was just a foregone conclusion that the Phillies were going to win the National League pennant, which back then there was no NLCS. It was just whoever came in first place in the league, they went to the World Series. By September 20th, they were up 6.5 games, 12 games left to play. I mean, obviously, it was a foregone conclusion. Then Chico Ruiz still home. They lost a game, and then it was all downhill from there. They lost 10 straight. I saw an interview with Dick Allen, who once said it just was overwhelming. We just knew we were going to lose. It was just a matter of how we were going to lose. It was like the proverbial snowball just came, and it was too much for them. Now, here's the key to that team. Like I said, they were that guy that I spoke to at the graduation party. Still is very had very fond, and you could tell those wounds were still fresh for this dude. But is it not their fault? Because their manager at the time was Gene Mauch. And Gene Mauch, after he was responsible for not going to the World Series here with the Phillies, he actually choked 2 more times as the coach of the California Angels. In 1982, the NL and ALCSs were only the best of 5. He was up 2-0 and blew it in 1982. And then in 1986, they moved to 7 games. They were up. The Angels were up 3-1 on the Red Sox, and he blew it both times. Gene Mauch was the manager, so maybe it necessarily wasn't the Phillies' fault. Maybe it was Gene Mauch, the curse of Gene Mauch. Just a little side thing there that I did never put 2 and 2 together until researching everything for this episode. So there's your 8-seed 64 Phillies. Everybody knows their story. So I played this out on What If Sports, and it was a close one. These teams were way more evenly matched than what I had anticipated. I expected the 09 team to really run away with it. This one went 5-5. So after 5-5, I did one last tiebreaker game. I put the 2 best pitchers on the mound, played it at Citizens Bank Park, Cliff Lee versus Jim Bunning, and Cliff Lee pitched a 3-0 shutout. Went 8 innings. Lidge came in and got the save. So the 09 team did win on a tiebreaker. But who wins? You guys let me know. I know a lot of you are listening, but not as many of you are voting. Be sure to vote. Shoot me a text message if you have to. But let me know who wins. the 2009 Phillies, the number 1 seed, or the number 8 seed 1964 Phillies. Remember, use whatever criteria you want, but both of these teams really, really hit every criteria I would use. Disappointment level, check. Talent level, check. Sting disappointment and just like wanting to like, oh, we were so close, check. So let me know. Be sure to vote wherever you get your podcast. Check me out on my social media. Like I said, send me a checklist or a text message, smoke signal, Morse code, whatever you have to do. Get your votes in, because to me, this is the epitome of this tournament. On this day, back in 1964, Johnny Callison won the All-Star Game MVP after hitting a 3-run walk-off home run for that 64 Phillies team. No real new updates on As the Heart Turns. We'll keep you posted as they come in. Go Phils. I mean, it's going to be a steamy one up here, but why not sit in the AC or sit by the pool and watch the Phils take on the Marlins and try to tie that club record for road wins in a row? This has been This Day in Philly Sports History. I'm Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a Friday, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.